escalations in the trade war with China, maritime action plans, and importers who are caught with their pants down pissing into the wind from this reciprocal tariff tornado. I'm Greg, and I'm bringing back episode 2 of Greg Talks Trade, which is a show for people who like to follow global trade, but might not be nerdy enough to have a copy of the 19 CFR at home. Today what I'm going to talk about is the recent week's updates regarding reciprocal tariffs. I'll talk about an executive order that might end up changing harbor maintenance fees in the future, and a few problems that I'm seeing importers facing regarding these new tariffs. So to start off, I want to talk about the recent week's updates with reciprocal tariffs. The big news was a 125% put on China, which when added with the 20% IEEPAs is now 145% in new tariffs on China. The other big headline grabber was a 90-day pause on elevated tariff levels for other countries. So this will bring them back down to that base 10% level for 90 days. And in theory, if nothing changes, it'll go back to the elevated levels of reciprocal tariffs after 90 days. What does this mean? It means if your cargo departed on the final vessel leg or final flight leg prior to April 4th, it should be 0%. From April 5th to April 8th, it should be 10%. On April 9th, it'll be those elevated reciprocal tariff levels for all countries, and on that day, China was at 84%. April 10th and later, it'll be 10% on all countries, and China will be that 125%. This is all assuming no new changes on dates or tariff levels, but things have been changing every day, so don't hold your breath. The other thing that's noteworthy is late on Friday, Trump announced an exclusion on reciprocal tariffs for a variety of products, things like smartphones, computers, and other electronics. Next, I want to talk about harbor maintenance fees. President Trump made a new executive order last week calling for a maritime action plan to be completed within 210 days. This has a really interesting call out on harbor maintenance fees. Currently, harbor maintenance fees are just a 0.125% tax on U.S. imports coming through U.S. ocean ports or harbors. This is possibly going to increase in one specific situation. If you have cargo coming into an ocean port in Canada or Mexico and then arriving in the U.S. via truck or rail, you're not paying harbor maintenance fees because you're not using a U.S. harbor or ocean port. Makes sense. However, this executive order wants harbor maintenance fees to apply when cargo is first coming through a Canadian or Mexican ocean port, even though the U.S. harbor is not being used. In addition, the executive order calls for interest, other charges, and a 10% service fee in situations where it comes through Mexico or Canada first. This is quite steep, and honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It feels like I'm driving from my home in Georgia to a beach vacation in Florida, but I'm paying a highway toll from the Ohio Turnpike. I'm not driving on the Ohio Turnpike, and importers are not using U.S. harbors in this situation. I don't get it. Next, I want to talk about bonds. What an import customs bond is, it's an insurance policy that makes sure even if the importer runs out of money, customs will still get paid the duties they are owed. And with all of these reciprocal tariffs increasing estimated duties that importers are going to have to pay, this is increasing liability on the bond companies if an importer were to be unable to pay. Because of this, some bond companies are requiring that bonds increase if importers are kind of close to their limit. So if you haven't had a conversation recently with your bond provider, it might be a good idea to check in and make sure you won't run into any trouble down the road if your estimated import duties are going up. If there's any trouble, there could be a situation where you will not be able to customs clear your imports until your bond is increased. This can take a couple of days in some situations, so let's avoid trouble and make sure we are up to speed with our bond providers. So some importers have cargo on the way, and now they are realizing, oh no, these tariffs are too high, I can't afford to pay them, I need to get out of it somehow. There's a few things I'm being asked about, like FTZs and Bonded Warehouses, that offer some solutions in certain situations. To start with FTZs, your cargo can go into them and be held indefinitely, and you'll probably be going into these FTZs in privileged foreign status. What this means is your duties are calculated on the day that your cargo goes into the FTZ, but you don't pay the duties until your cargo goes out of it. So if you put goods into it on April 15th and you take them out on October 1st, you will pay your duties on October 1st, but it'll be on whatever the duties would have been on April 15th. This is not super helpful for importers trying to get out of the 145 on China, but if they're looking at the 90-day pause on some of these elevated levels on reciprocal tariffs on a country like Vietnam perhaps, they might think, I can lock in the 10% on this reciprocal instead of paying that higher amount down the road after the pause ends. So with bonded warehouses, there are about 10 or 11 different classes of them. Some are some really obscure areas, things like grain silos and pig pens. So the one that most importers are going to be looking for is a Class 3 bonded warehouse. At a Class 3 bonded warehouse, you can hold your goods there for up to 5 years, and your duties are calculated not on the day you put it into the warehouse, but on the day you take it out. Kind of the opposite of an FTZ. So if you bring the goods in on April 15 and you take them out on October 1st, your duties will be calculated based on that October 1st date. If you are importing from China and you think maybe the tariffs will go down by October 1st, you might put it into a Class 3 bonded warehouse and hope and pray the tariffs go down. This is a mitigation strategy I've been hearing a lot about, but it's kind of complicated to set up relationships with these FTZs and Class 3 bonded warehouses quickly. So if you really need to do this, look into it soon and understand that a lot of companies are looking for these services right now, so space is probably limited at anyone who still has some space. I hope I was able to help with my recap of the recent updates in the last week. And these problems and solutions, just know that they are general and not tailored specifically to you. For solutions specifically to you, talk to your brokers or feel free to drop a comment or DM for me. This has been episode 2 of Greg Talks Trade. See you next time.